Hello everyone, good day, and I would like to say hello to all viewers who are watching this video right now, and to all listeners. And I actually named this podcast as Rev Stop Podcast after our topic in this episode. And way before anything goes, everything, let me first introduce myself first. So before we tackle our discussion for this podcast, my name is Mr. Jeffoni Noel Igot, and I'm gonna be your host for this podcast. And currently, we have been discussing and learning literature in our program. We are learning in all literature in our country and in the world as things emerge today. We are and we must study and the history and information. And for today's episode, I have invited two of my classmates in the school institution, and we will be discussing to you our subject. I know I can feel already the excitement and enthusiasm arousing when I planned this episode. I know well of our colleagues, and I hope you will learn from us. Actually, last week I had a hard time inviting them, but since they give me the opportunity to invite them and to have filmed themselves in this topic, so I would like to emphasize their presence in this podcast.
Hello, I am Innomarie. I am 19 years old. I live in Bato, Leyte. I'm a third-year college student taking up the program Bachelor in Secondary Education, major in English. When I was a kid, I dreamt of becoming an honors student, but in high school, I don't see myself loving science stuff anymore. That was the time when my English teacher came into my life. She introduced me the literature, the beauty of the English language. She introduced me basically poetry. It's the poetry. I'm really into literature, about literature, because I'm not really good. I'm not good at technical aspect in English. When we were told to make a podcast on literature after EDSA, the first statement I've told myself is that you can't do it because this is the hard stuff. Talking about things with conviction, with information, with people listening to you. But after reading, researching everything about the EDSA revolution and the literature after it, I kind of told myself, this will be a challenge. This will be something new for me. Making a podcast is a very challenging task. You have to talk with sophistication, with conviction, with accurate information you have to tell everyone. So after evaluating myself, after assessing myself of how can I do it, how am I going to talk about it, the final thing I've told myself is that now I kind of looking forward to it with my colleagues, especially with my colleagues, Mariame and Jeffoni. And yeah, tune in to our podcast. And that's it.
Hello everyone, I'm Maria May Molaza, a third-year student, BS Ed major in English, Section L. I love to travel, I love to enjoy and discover things, and I do really love music. Fun fact about me is that I really love to listen rap music, especially from those local artists, because I found it fantastic and realistic in a way. Being a third-year education student was never been easy as it sounds, because it requires a lot of effort, time, and it somehow requires you to be more capable of doing things. This course is more in line with literature, and let me share this to you guys that way back when I was a little, I am not that fond of literature because I found it boring and a waste of time reading books, making short poems and all those things. But As the time changes, the opportunity somehow open up for me to know literature in a deeper level. And as of this moment, I can say that literature is a must for me, or I need literature because this is the only way for me to escape from the reality, to escape from the problems or the pain that life has thrown onto me. So, when our instructor instructed us to have a podcast, it turns me into excitement, and as well as I'm being challenged because I'm not that very particular on how I'm going to give the flavor of the podcast in order to have a beautiful delivery, in order to have a beautiful presentation. The good thing here is I can choose those people whom I love to work with, especially to my colleagues, Miss Ina Anadon and Mr. Gifoni Igot, whom have a creative mind in doing our podcast or in making our podcast even more beautiful. I am very excited with our podcast, and let us all together know the literature after EDSA revolution. Thank you so much.
I know everyone these days feel a little bit uninspired due to the false information, and I don't know how messy we are right now. With this kind of situation, this podcast will help you to learn something informative and personal as well. And before we proceed to the main podcast, I have prepared a trivia information. Actually, these are the trivias that are most likely not to reveal to us information on the behind the scenes of EDSA revolution. I know talking about political stuff is trivial, but in my case and my concern, I will be talking with limits. Okay, so at this point, I have prepared 10 trivias. Our trivia number 1. Despite the presence of tank riding soldiers and big guns, not a single shot was fired. Trivia number 2. Since the Ninoy's assassination, yellow has been the color of revolution. And number 3. Ninoy's widow Korea Kido was not in EDSA. During the entire revolution, she was in Cebu conducting her own protests. Number 4. Cardinal Sin was the one who led the Catholic Church participation in the revolution. Number 5. Handog ng Pilipino sa Mundo was composed by songwriter Jem Paderes 2 months after the revolution. And number 6, People Power Monument, which was also built to commemorate the event that was then built 7 years after the revolution on 1993, is located at the corner of EDSA and the White Plains Avenue, less than kilometer away from the EDSA shrine. Trivia number 7. On the day Marcos and family departed in our country for exile in Hawaii, Corazon Aquino was inaugurated as the 11th and first female president of the Philippines. And number 8, performers like Apo Hiking Society staged mini concerts during the revolution. Number 9, the L hand symbol means laban. It was the eminent hand gesture of promoters during the revolution. And number 10, Corazon Aquino was hesitant to go against Ferdinand Marcos for the snap elections. So these 10 EDSA related facts are presented essentially and all to you, viewers and listeners, and later on we will conduct the podcast after my colleagues arrives. The EDSA revolution is also tagged as People Power Revolution, 1986 Philippine Revolution, and even Yellow Revolution. And to know more about this historic event, along with its literature, you'll be tuning in this podcast. I am Gifoni Noel Igot, host of the newest podcast about literature, specifically the period of literature after the EDSA Revolution in the Philippines. Joining in today, my colleagues from the school institution, Miss Eng19 and Miss Marimay Malaza.
Thank you for having us today, Jupone.
We're also glad that we were invited in this podcast.
Thank you so much, girls. And two people that will help us better understand today's adventure. Last week, we have learned the history and literature from the US colonialism and literature under the Republic. And today, we will present the massive revolution ever happened in our Philippine history. And before diving into details, let us first understand how the revolution changed the world. So, how are you, Miss Marimay Malaza?
Well, doing great. How about you?
Well, I'm doing great too. So, what about you, Miss Eng19?
Well, we are living in this time that challenges are upon us, and still we are doing the best way we could.
Well said. So, in this podcast, we're going to talk, discuss, and elaborate, share our thoughts and ideas about EDSA Revolution. So, when you hear the word EDSA Revolution, Ma'am Eng19, what can you say or what's your idea and thoughts about this?
We often get a lot of experiences during this time, but we do not really know what really happened. Back when we were high school, we often hear the holidays about EDSA Revolution. We share enthusiasm about it. We get happy about it, and yet we do not know what really happened from this revolution.
Really? So, what about you, Marimay Malaza?
Well, you know what, Jupone? When I hear EDSA Revolution 1986, what comes into my mind is that there's a power in unity. Because just like those people in the People Power Revolution, they are very passionate and they really want to end the dictatorship of Ferdinand Marcos and to restore the country's democracy.
I'm so happy and I'm so glad to know about the EDSA Revolution, and both of you have different perspective in EDSA Revolution. So,
Can I say something?
yeah, go ahead, Mamina.
Say something about what Mari may have told us earlier about her opinions about the EDSA revolution. So that's for her. And for me, this revolution is evident that it existed, that took no life, that shed no blood in our history. This is a bloodless revolution happened in the Philippines. However, there is a common misconception about the 1986 People Power Revolution. Here we are talking about our late brothers that sacrificed their lives. Thousands of human rights that are being trampled upon. A lot of torture victims, really. Salvage victims, yet we call it peaceful. No, peaceful isn't the right or the proper term for it.
Yes.
But we do know that we Filipinos are very optimistic. We tend to masquerade chaos into peace, to bring each other, bring the hope of our nation. That's for me.
Alright, so in this episode, I prepared a few questions related to our topic for this episode about the EDSA Revolution. So the first question is, how does literature take place after EDSA Revolution?
Well, you know what, Jupone? Philippines is very rich in literature. It may include the myths, the folk songs, the poems, the short stories that it really helps in shaping our culture and tradition. And remember that it also helps in establishing our own identity.
Indeed, wonderful. All right. So what about you, Ma'am Ina? What's your take about the idea of Miss Marie Malaza?
So, like many other contemporary writers, they were still trying to establish their place on the history of Philippine contemporary literature. And writers could choose whatever topic they want, whatever topic, whatever message they were trying to imply on us, and whatever their hearts are screaming about. But I guess it's nationalism that resound the Philippine literature during this time.
All right. Thank you so much, Ma'am Ina.
I would like to add something.
Okay.
Guys, creative writing centers after EDSA that is grouped into two. Creative writing that is part of the curricular offerings in academic institutions, and the second one is composed of writers' organization that sponsors symposium writing and interested parties like Pasulat, Katha, or even Lira, Gumil, Ludabi, Panday Lipi, Gat, and Pen. These developments in writing gives enthusiasm to the writers' future writings to master their craft. There are also award-giving bodies, annual competitions, and even publications that provide the writers to keep producing.
So basically, it's the literature after EDSA produced campus publications. Well, I've been a part of a campus publication when I was in high school. I was assigned as editorial writer, but supposedly I'm really in love with the feature writing, but unfortunately I was being tasked to write editorial stuff. And then for me as a writer, this helped me to master my craft, to produce more literature, to write more stories, and these help the writers to free their expression, because back in the EDSA revolution, the writers' expressions were suppressed. They weren't able to communicate their feelings, they weren't able to speak out their emotions, and this literature after the EDSA eradicate the struggling for recognition and survival for the writers.
Since you mentioned about the creative writing, Miss Marie Malaza, so about creative writing, what types of or type of creative writing that grows or flourished after the EDSA revolution?
It includes the modern poetry. This is a new style of poetry writing in Tagalog, a deviation from the highly rhymed declamatory tradition known for many centuries. And it also includes the modern short stories. These are the stories set in the Philippine in English language, and may include the novel and of course the essay.
I'm fueled and energized about your answers, guys. Oh my god, that's so interesting. And way back to our topic about this podcast, we're talking about EDSA revolution. So I am a bit curious. I am curious about what really happened after decades of EDSA revolution. So what's your take about this? What's your opinion? What's your ideas about this? After decades, right? After decades. So what's your take or what's your ideas and thoughts about this?
So the majority did not really benefit from EDSA. Still, poverty did not vanish. There are still families that roam around and live on these streets. You know, we were a society then that is left behind by the Western way culture of life, that our leaders can really stand from it. But what if the oppressors are just trying to change colors? And I could really relate this when we have read The Animal Farm, right?
Yes,
Animal Farm.
absolutely.
Have you read that book?
Yes, I already read the book, and
Yes.
it's a very nice story.
Yes.
And it's something something like the character of Napoleon, right?
Yeah.
Big one.
Yeah.
It's something like really reflects the current leadership during that time, and it's very interesting.
What about our situation right now? So that book relates our situation this
I think
time.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, yes, but
So, fortunately, the EDSA gave the world a new way of
Yeah.
looking at
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
We did not let history repeat itself from us being weak to being strong. We have killed the oppression from the late President Ferdinand Marcos, and we have revived the country through the revolution. EDSA actually gave hope to something that has been torturing us for years and make us to move our mobility, to move also as a nation.
since you mentioned about the animal farm, make this opportunity to speak for yourself and for yourself. Give your messages to whoever watching this podcast. So, shall we start with you, Miss Maria Malaza?
Okay, Mr. Dupont. So I would like to reach those boxers out there. Don't consider yourself to remain uneducated, because all of us had a special capabilities in doing something, in doing great things to achieve a society full of love and respect. So now I'm trying to reach every one of us here to use our voice and to make our voice counted.
Indeed. What about you, Ma'am Ina?
This is for the bluebells of the world. This is for the Benjamins of the world. I know we Filipinos are being seen as little, but this little change that we can use is will be massive for the change of the Philippines. Do not be the one-tamads of the world, but be the catalyst to change. That's for me.
Yeah, thank you so much, girls. And for me, for those people who are running for the position for the government, my advice and words that could help them to run, or for those people who are running for the position for the government, and I would like to encourage them to make use of the power and privilege to help our nation to be better. Do not be the Napoleons and the squillers of the world, but be the snowball of the world. Thank you so much. Okay, before we formally end our podcast, Ms. Maria Malaza and Ms. Ina, I would like to grab this opportunity to thank you. Thank you for sparing your time and a very informative discussion for this podcast. This is an episode of the podcast that discusses the EDSA revolution and literature after this revolution. We witnessed and answers and opinions from my colleagues, Ms. Ina and Ms. Maria Malaza, and I had a really good time talking to you and you, Ms. Malaza. And these two young women, or woman, actually, this is my first ever podcast, and I am really overwhelmed with information that could help us understand for the next episode or podcast for this course. This is Mr. Giovanni Noel Igot, your host from Rev Stop Podcast. Thank you so much for watching. Bye! Use the power to to make use of power to make mouse.
Make you
This is the podcast for this.